Dusty Duck and the Golden Egg Heist. Act 1. The Mystery Unfolds, Chapter 1. Quacktown's Biggest Treasure. The sun hung low over the prairie, turning the sky into a dusty gold as tumbleweeds rolled lazily across Quacktown's main street. The town was buzzing with excitement, and not just because Cactus Pete's General Store was having a 2-for-1 sale on corn biscuits. No, sir, today was special. Today, Quacktown was welcoming its greatest treasure, the legendary Golden Egg. Sheriff Quackers adjusted his big old cowboy hat and puffed out his chest. He wasn't just the fastest duck in Quacktown. He was the fastest quacker this side of the Dusty River. And today, it was his job to make sure that the Golden Egg, a symbol of Quacktown's prosperity, stayed safe in the town bank. "Y'all listen up," Sheriff Quackers called, standing atop the wooden steps of the town hall. The gathered ducks, geese, and a particularly nosy prairie dog named Pip quieted down. This here egg ain't just a pretty sight. It's a piece of Quacktown history. Passed down from the first flock to settle these lands, it's said to bring good fortune to whoever protects it. "Oh," whispered Flapjack, a tiny duckling who dreamed of being a real cowboy. His eyes were as wide as the brim of Sheriff Quackers' hat. Standing beside Sheriff Quackers was Dusty Duck, a lone rider who had just blown into town that morning. He was lean, a little scruffy, and had the kind of squint that said, "I've seen things," like a coyote stealing my lunch. He wore a weathered duster coat, spurred boots, and carried an air of mystery. "That sure is a mighty fine-looking egg," Dusty drawled, tipping his hat. "Ain't it?" said Buck, Dusty's loyal bronco goose, who was chewing a sprig of wheat. "Shiniest thing I ever done saw. Makes me want to polish my feathers just looking at it." The townfolk all gathered as Mayor Wattlebottom, a round-bellied duck with a monocle, oversaw the grand unveiling. With a grand flourish, he yanked the cover off the egg's display case, and the crowd gasped. There it was, the golden egg. It shimmered in the afternoon sun, a perfect, gleaming treasure. It was so dazzling that even Cactus Pete, the grumpy old armadillo who ran the general store, removed his hat in respect. "Well, butter my biscuit and roll me in cornbread," Cactus Pete muttered. "That there's the prettiest piece of poultry treasure I ever did see." The town cheered. The ducks quacked. A nearby banjo player struck up a celebratory tune. But in the shadows of a nearby alley, someone was watching. That night, under the cover of darkness, the saloon was lively with laughter and the sound of tiny duck spurs clinking against the wooden floor. Sheriff Quackers sat at a table, playing a round of cards with Dusty Duck, Buck, and Flapjack, who had somehow managed to sneak into the game despite barely being tall enough to see the table. Dusty smirked. "Y'all ever hear the legend of the Golden Egg?" he asked, laying down his winning hand. "The one about it bringing luck?" Sheriff Quackers asked, narrowing his eyes as he realized he had just lost again. "Nah, the other one," Dusty said, leaning in close. "The one that says whoever steals it and solves its secret will control all the riches of Quacktown." Flapjack gasped so hard he fell off his chair. Sheriff Quackers scoffed. "Ain't nothing but an old ducktail." But before Dusty could respond, a loud crash echoed through the night. The town froze. Sheriff Quackers' feathers bristled. That came from the bank. In a blur of feathers and cowboy hats, the group rushed outside, just in time to see a shadowy figure darting across the rooftops, carrying a large sack. A single black feather floated down to the dusty ground. Flapjack picked it up with trembling wings. "Sheriff," he squeaked, "I think we got a problem." Sheriff Quackers bent down, inspecting the feather. His jaw clenched. He knew exactly who this belonged to. "Feather bandits," he growled. Dusty Duck straightened his hat. "Looks like we got ourselves a heist." The town gasped. The golden egg was gone. Sheriff Quackers clenched his beak. This wasn't just a robbery. This was war. Chapter 2. The Midnight Heist. The moon hung high over Quacktown, casting silver light over the wooden buildings, the hitching posts, and the rickety old town bank. Inside, behind thick iron bars and a lock as sturdy as a goose's bad temper, sat the golden egg, shining like the very sun itself. Sheriff Quackers had done his rounds, patrolling the town with the swagger of a duck who had seen it all. He tipped his hat, let out a deep sigh, and settled into his rocking chair outside the sheriff's office. "Ain't nobody fool enough to steal from Quacktown," he muttered, rocking back and forth. Little did he know, somebody was fool enough, and they were already halfway through the heist. Inside the Quacktown bank, The shadows stretched long as three figures slinked through the dimly lit room. They moved silent as a tumbleweed in a ghost town, their black masked faces barely visible under their wide-brimmed hats. Their tails flicked back and forth, and their little raccoon paws worked fast, picking the massive iron lock with skill that could make a locksmith cry. These weren't just any outlaws. They were the Feather Bandits, the sneakiest, slipperiest, most feather-plucking, no-good raccoons in the Wild West. "Quincy," whispered the smallest raccoon, glancing nervously around. "You're sure this is a good idea?" The biggest of the bunch, Quincy Quickpaws, adjusted his tiny bandana and grinned. "Sure as a rooster wakes the sun, Lou. Now hush up and keep watch." The third bandit, a wiry raccoon named Slick, reached into his tool pouch and pulled out a strange-looking key. "This baby was made special for us by the best safecracker in the West." "Who?" Lou whispered. Slick winked. "Ain't important." With a soft click, the iron door swung open, and there it was. The golden egg. The raccoons all froze, staring at it in wonder. "Woo-wee," Quincy breathed. "That there's the prettiest hunk of treasure I ever laid eyes on." Slick rubbed his paws together. "We're gonna be richer than a beaver with a dam full of gold." Lou, still a little unsure, hesitated. "Ain't stealing the legendary golden egg bad luck?" Quincy scoffed. "Nonsense, we're borrowing it." Lou frowned. "Borrowing usually means giving it back." "Well," Quincy grinned, hoisting the egg into a burlap sack. "Guess we'll be breaking that habit." The three raccoons scurried toward the exit, moving fast and quiet, but just as they reached the door, clang! Lou tripped over a spittoon, sending it clattering across the wooden floor like a stampede of cattle on a tin roof. The sound ripped through the night, echoing down the street. Sheriff Quackers jerked awake in his rocking chair, his hat nearly falling off. "What in the quackin' world was that?" Inside the bank, Quincy glared at Lou. "I told you to be quiet." "I got small legs," Lou whispered. "No time for squawking, we gotta go," Slick hissed. The Feather Bandits bolted out of the bank, darting through back alleys and across the rooftops like shadowy acrobats. Sheriff Quackers, still half asleep, grabbed his lantern and waddled toward the bank. His eyes widened in horror. The vault was wide open. The egg was gone. And on the dusty wooden floor, right in front of him, lay a single black feather. The sheriff snatched it up, his feathers ruffling with anger. "Feather Bandits," he growled. The town was about to wake up to the worst news in Quacktown history. And Sheriff Quackers wasn't about to let those no-good raccoons get away with it. Chapter 3. Dusty duck rides in. Morning light stretched across Quacktown, painting the dusty streets gold and setting the town abuzz with the worst news in its history. The golden egg was gone. Sheriff Quackers stood in front of the bank, his wings crossed, his beak set in a hard line. The Feather Bandits had struck in the dead of night, and all they'd left behind was a single black feather. The townsfolk gathered, murmuring in shock. "That egg's been in Quacktown since my great-grandpappy waddled west," squawked old Mrs. Puddleworth, fanning herself dramatically. "If we don't get it back," said Mayor Waddlebottom, adjusting his monocle, "why, Quacktown might never see good fortune again." Sheriff Quackers silenced them with a raised wing. "I know y'all are ruffled, but we're gonna get that egg back. And when we do, those raccoon varmints are gonna learn not to mess with Quacktown justice." Just then, the ground rumbled. A gust of wind kicked up a swirl of dust on the horizon. The rhythmic clop-clop of boots echoed down Main Street. The townsfolk turned. Through the morning haze, a lone rider emerged. A duck, tall and lean, clad in a long brown duster that fluttered behind him like a tumbleweed caught in the wind. His wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his face, but his keen, squinting eyes glinted like two golden nuggets. At his side rode a bronco goose, feathers ruffled, spurs jingling, chewing lazily on a sprig of wheat. The stranger pulled his hat lower and stopped at the hitching post outside the saloon. With a slow, practiced motion, he dismounted from his goose and dusted off his coat. The town held its breath. Sheriff Quackers eyed the newcomer. "Well now," he drawled, stepping forward. "Seems we got ourselves a visitor." The duck tipped his hat. "Name's Dusty Duck. I heard Quacktown's got itself a little problem." The crowd gasped. "Well, butter my biscuits," muttered Cactus Pete from the general store, scratching his chin. "That there's the infamous Lone Rider of the West, the duck who once stared down a rattlesnake and won." "That true?" Sheriff Quackers asked, folding his wings. Dusty shrugged. Might be, but I don't like to brag. Buck, the Bronco goose, rolled his eyes. He brags all the time. Dusty shot him a look, then turned back to the sheriff.
Heard y'all lost something shiny. Thought maybe I could help.
Sheriff Quackers narrowed his eyes. And what makes you think a lone rider like yourself can track down the feather bandits? Dusty leaned against a post, cool as a summer breeze. Because I know the feather bandits. Another gasp from the townsfolk. Miss Molly, the wise old owl, fluttered down from her perch.
He speaks the truth, she hooted.
I've heard tell of Dusty Duck riding with those raccoons, back before he turned to the side of the law.
Sheriff Quackers stiffened. That so? Dusty exhaled through his beak. Long time ago. I made some bad choices, ran with the wrong crowd. But I left that life behind. He straightened.
And now, I help folks like y'all set things right.
The sheriff studied him, his feathers twitching. The town needed help. And if Dusty really knew the feather bandits, then maybe, just maybe, he was the best chance Quacktown had.
You any good with a lasso?
Quackers finally asked. Dusty smirked.
Ain't a critter alive I can't wrangle.
Can you track?
Like a hawk with a magnifying glass.
Sheriff Quackers nodded slowly.
All right, Dusty Duck, you want to help Quacktown?
He extended a wing.
Then you ride with me.
Dusty grinned and shook the sheriff's wing. Let's go rustle up some raccoons.